Hi, welcome to another Now Playing vlog where I talk about some of the games I've been playing lately and what I think of them. The games in this video were voted on by my Patreon backers. If you'd like to help Actual grow bigger and better, go to patreon.com/Actual. There are links to all the games mentioned in the description below. Let's get on with it. Battle for Rokugan is an area control game that's a little bit inspired by diplomacy. The reason for that is that you control regions and then you are attacking other players, but you're placing your markers face down that will dictate what actions you do. So you're bluffing a bit in terms of where you might be attacking or what actions you might be taking that turn. So everyone has loads of these little markers and they draw 6 at random each round. So you are a little bit burdened by the game as to what you can choose, and then you will be putting them on the board on different borders. And it's quite a clever system, very simple to understand. If they're on a border, they're probably going to be attacking someone else. If they're in the middle of a region, they're probably going to be defending that region. But there are other special actions that can do special cool things. There's differing numbers with these attack and defense, so you don't necessarily know how much somebody's defending, whether you're going to win that attack. You're trying to control regions. They provide you points at the end of the game. You also have a secret objective, and so you might be told that you've got to control this capital, or you need a different area in each region. And the reason that I was interested in this game was because it reminded me a bit of Game of Thrones 2nd edition. This is a board game that was one of the first games that I really loved, a game of negotiation and diplomacy, which has the same system of playing tokens face down, and then you reveal and you see what people's plans really were. What's so great about Game of Thrones is that you can create alliances with other players and you can talk about what you're going to do. You can maybe lie to people, say that you're not going to attack them, and then you stab them in the back and you do attack them. But you can also support people in attack, and that's where the allying really works in Game of Thrones. I was disappointed that in Battle for Rokugan there is no scope for that. You can't support someone else in their attack, so you never really team up. All you can really do, just like in Risk, is have truce, make a pact of non-aggression, that you don't go across this border, and so that there's mutually beneficial, that if you hold this line together, then you can focus on other areas. But of course then somebody can backstab you later and change their mind about that pact. It doesn't have the same scope for chatting things through, going off and having a little chat outside the room like Game of Thrones. I was hoping that this was going to be a streamlined, shorter version of that game, and it is much shorter, plays in about 2 hours and packs quite a lot into it. But it doesn't have that spectacle and the theme, and it doesn't tell the stories that I have had from games of Game of Thrones. And so I can really appreciate this game. It certainly offers some interesting bluffing of trying to work out what other players are going to do, how are you best going to use your tokens for each round, and you've got some special abilities. There's these cards that you can race to try and get, which are controlled by certain regions, and you all start the game with 3 special cards which allow you to look at other people's tokens or remove them from the board. They're really powerful, and so you have to decide the best time to use them. There's a lot to like about this game. It's a beautifully simple system. It packs a lot into quite a small box. It's a breeze to learn the rules, and it plays quite quickly in about 2 hours. But for me, I thought I wanted a streamlined version of a bigger game, and actually it loses a lot of the flavor and the spectacle and really the reasons that I loved those games in the first place. So I think for the right group, this could really sing, but for me, it didn't really hit the spot. That's Battle for Rokugan. Queendomino is a game that came out a while back and won the Spiel des Jahres. It's a super simple gateway game where you are placing domino tiles and building a kingdom. You're trying to score points by having these crowns in regions and then making the regions bigger, and they create multipliers. You're trying to get the most points. It's a very clever, streamlined system. I like the way that you pick your domino tiles. It's got a really nice production to it. It looks really nice. And yet, I played it a few times and I didn't love it. I felt like it didn't have enough to grab me. There wasn't enough bite to it. It doesn't have the interaction of something like Carcassonne or the interesting decision-making of Capital. Those are both slightly more advanced games, and I felt like it was maybe just too beginner for me, but it certainly would be good for kids and families. And I can appreciate the game, it just wasn't one that I needed to own. So then Queen Domino came out at the following Essen, same designer, same idea, but adding a bunch of extra ways to make points. And so I thought I was going to love it because it is a really clever system. Maybe if they just added a few more things, I would like it. And yet Queen Domino hasn't worked for me. All of the ideas feel tacked on. They don't feel part of the essence of the game. They feel like ways to give you alternative strategies, different ways to make points for sure. You can buy these buildings that allow you to score smaller regions, so it's no longer necessarily about having big regions. You can simply buy points. You have these little workers that tax regions to get the money. You use the money to buy the buildings. There's a lot more going on, and yet none of it made me feel more excited about the game. It's still about selecting those dominoes and having big regions and having crowns, and you can get types of points in different ways, but the amount of extra rules that it brings in, that extra bit of setup, more components, it's now a much less approachable game, and yet I'm not sure it's rewarded in experience. I don't find it to be more fun. I just find it to be more of a drag. And I'm surprised by that reaction. But I am someone that doesn't especially care for the game Seven Wonders. I think that a hand drafting card game should generally be a light experience. I love Sushi Go, and I feel that that kind of system doesn't work with a deeper, more involved game, and I just find Seven Wonders to be not that thematic, not that interesting to me. I think I can respect it, it's not for me. And Queen Domino, it's a little bit similar to that. It's almost the Seven Wonders to King Domino's Sushi Go. It feels unsatisfying, point salad-y, in the sense that you get 2 points for that and 2 points for that, and there are a lot of different ways to make lots of little points, but it's bitty. It doesn't have that war of attrition that you get in Carcassonne where you're fighting out farmers. It's where, you know, there's real competition. It's just trying to etch up as many points as you can get. And of course, that's how a lot of board games play out. It's just not something that really pulls me into a game. So I think it's full of decisions, but just none that I can really get excited about. And so for that reason, Queen Domino wasn't for me. Star Cartel is a stock market card game with a space theme. This is from Osprey Games, quite a nice production, small box that they do those little sizes. And it packs quite a lot of game into that small box. You have a spaceship and you are trading goods that are affecting that stock market. And at the end of the game, you want to have the most goods in the type of good that is scoring the most points at the end. So you are affecting how that stock market moves. The way you do that is on your turn, you take some goods. So there's 5 or 6 different types of goods. You'll take some cards, put them in your spaceship. When your spaceship is full up, you have to trade those goods, and that's when you manipulate the market. The type of card that you have the biggest set of, the good with the biggest set, that good will go up on the market. The type that you have the smallest set of will go down. But you don't get to keep any of those cards. They all get discarded. You get to keep a middle set, which then goes into your stash, and that's how you might get points at the end of the game. So it's an interesting dilemma where you are affecting goods prices, but you don't get to keep those goods. And so you have to kind of balance it out, push them up one turn, and then try and get it so it's a middle set and a feature turn so you can stash it. So you are effectively, every time you put up a good, you're putting up something that's maybe going to help someone else because they're going to be stashing it that round. There's also a race to improve your ship. Every time you trade out goods, you effectively upgrade your ship. And the ships are worth points themselves, which I think is a little bit boring as a way to get points, but they also give you special powers. And so they give you ways to change the game, allow you to trade things slightly differently, and that's quite nice. One of the surprising things about it as a stock market game is that you don't buy high and sell low, you don't ever get to sell out until the end of the game. So you're manipulating this market, but the relevance of that market is only important at the end of the game, and so it will swing around. You can crash a stock. If it goes too high, it will crash back down, and you might have been really investing in that. So I suppose there's a kind of a timing aspect to it, but what you imagine with the stock market game is that you would be able to sell when the time is right, and that's just not the case with this, but it's a relatively short game. And so whilst I think Star Cartel is nice, I think it does what it's trying to do quite well. It's a bit too long for a filler game, but there are some interesting decisions in there. I felt that it wasn't a fun enough experience for me, and there's certainly some thought to it, but the interaction I didn't find to be that interesting. It was a bit too long to just consider it a light filler experience, and the theme wasn't doing anything for me either. So whilst I can't really find like a strong fault with the game, that it's imbalanced or anything like that, I just think that it's like so many games that get released these days. There are so many 6 out of 10 games, and because games are getting better and better, and certainly this one's a really nicely produced one with some decent artwork, but it doesn't have that X factor to recommend it above all the other 6 out of 10 games. And so it might be something for you if you really like stock market games, maybe if you really like space themes, but it wasn't one for me. That's Star Cartel. Harvest Island is a card game that I picked up at Essen. This is from Taiwan, and you are planting and growing fruits. You are trying to harvest the best crops of fruits. You're competing against the other players. And the way you're doing that is by collecting sets of fruit cards. So you're drawing them from that season. The game splits up into 4 different seasons. And then you are planting them as seeds into you've got 3 different fields. And then you are also adding to them to try and grow the biggest harvest of that type of fruit. And there's an interesting push your luck aspect to this game because there is weather that will affect you. So the different seasons have different types of weather that are shuffled into the deck. And when they come out, if 3 of the same type, so if there's 3 sunshine or 3 rain, that weather is so strong that it either rains out your crops or it kind of, it dries them out. There's a drought. And so you lose your biggest crop. It gets halved. And everyone loses that. So there's a timing to when you harvest your fruit, because if you leave it too long, you might lose a lot of stuff. And so that's a nice push your luck balance of, because if you keep pushing on the fruits that are the most plentiful, like bananas, then you could get really, really big, but you don't want to wait too long. The other thing is that each different season has a different selection of different fruits, and it tells you that on the board, which is quite nice. You can really track what's going to be available. So of course it's luck of the draw what you get, but you can plan, oh okay, these fruits are only available in the spring and the summer, so I need to harvest quite soon because then I can free up that field for some autumn and winter fruits instead. There's interesting decisions to the game in terms of timing, and you've got 3 different fields. One can only hold a small amount, one's like a medium amount, and one can hold unlimited. So which fruits do you plant in which fields? When do you harvest? Because a harvesting takes up a whole turn, so it wastes time when you're not picking up cards. So you kind of want to harvest everything at once, but you also want to keep things growing, because if you harvest now, you won't get the biggest harvest. Because that's the thing, is you're competing with the other players to have the biggest harvest. That's one of the best ways to get points in the game. So for example, if I harvest 4 bananas, I will win the little trophy 4 bananas, and that's a lot of points at the end of the game. If somebody else then beats me by growing 5 bananas later on, they steal that trophy off me. And so I was stupid to have harvested my bananas so soon, and I should have waited and grown it to an insurmountable number. And so there's that back and forth with the other players. So it plays 4 players. I felt that it went a bit too long for me, the 4 seasons. It's, you know, a little bit repetitive in the sense of you're just doing this set collection and going through, and it went on maybe sort of 45 minutes to an hour, and I would have preferred it a bit shorter. certainly in a 4-player game. I think it's an enjoyable game. I think it's a good gateway game, family game, almost what I would describe a good parent game. The rules are very simple and approachable. It is engaging as an experience, but it didn't have that extra bite for me that I was hoping for. So it's a little bit similar to classic set collection games like Arboretum or Bonanza, but in those games they've got an extra twist. In Arboretum it's about placement of your cards, and in Bonanza there's trading, which I really love. Harvest Island doesn't have anything extra. You're really just taking the cards. I suppose there's a bit of push your luck. And whilst I think the game is good, it wasn't quite great for me. So I would recommend Harvest Island to someone that's looking for a relaxing set collection game. It's got really nice artwork and super smooth gameplay, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to anyone, and it wasn't one that I ultimately kept. That's Harvest Island. Matterhorn is a push your luck dice game that I picked up at Essen. This is a relatively small box filler game where you are climbing the mountain of Matterhorn, and you have 2 climbers, and on your turn you roll a bunch of dice and you are trying to not go bust, and you're trying to get numbers that match the different rows of the mountain, and the person who gets both their climbers to the top of the mountain first wins the game. So you roll the bunch of dice. You can't count any doubles or triples. But what you can do is remove dice to kind of set them aside. And so if I have only doubles and triples, I can get rid of one, then that will free up a number that I can now use. And so you're adding up the dice that aren't in doubles or triples, and that is the number you have. So you might get anywhere, hopefully between sort of 5 and 12, and then you put a marker on that spot. You can't then roll that number again. So you might roll again and get a different number and put that on. If you get a number that matches a row that you're on, or a climber is on, you get a free action. So that's quite cool. You aim for those numbers. But as you start to fill up more rows, you're gonna be much more likely to go bust. And the more you roll, and the more you set aside dice, the dice maybe aren't gonna add up to enough, because if you roll below 5 or above 12, that's another way you can go bust. Of course, if you go bust, you lose all your progress. So those markers that you put down, they represent actions. So if you decide, okay, I'm done, let's say I got 3 markers down, I can then use 3 actions. So I might move my climbers 3 spaces. That's pretty much what you're gonna do. You can move other climbers out the way, and you can also remove these obstacles, but generally you're gonna move your climbers to try and get them up the mountain. If you go bust, you lose all that progress and it's the next person's turn. When you finish your turn, your markers turn into obstacles. So as the game goes on, it becomes fraught with all these trees and avalanches, and there's a lot less paths to get up the mountain. And the gameplay is sort of fine. It's reminiscent of the classic push your luck game Can't Stop, because it really is about how many times you want to roll those dice. I found that it can be quite brutal because of you can't get the doubles and triples. You can get kind of hammered, and also I found it's just a bit too long on a person's turn, because there's a bit of extra maths to it, and having to work out what you can set aside, and then you could potentially go sort of 4, 5, 6 rolls. Everyone else is just kind of waiting. That wasn't that great. The maths aspect I just felt it didn't make the game that much more enjoyable. Maybe it could be good for kids learning addition, but it kind of just slowed it down for me. I'm not that good at mental arithmetic. The game didn't pull us back in. We played it. I played it with a bunch of different groups, but the first play, it's a relatively short game. Nobody was like, oh, I want to play that again. Everyone was kind of done with it. So it's a nice production. It looks really nice. Helvetique, this Swiss publisher, had a load of really beautiful looking games at Essen, but I'm afraid the gameplay just didn't match. And so I wouldn't recommend Matterhorn. Those were some of the games I've been playing lately. I've put links to where you can buy all of them in the description below. If you like this video and you want to see more in this series, then please subscribe to the channel. And if you want to help the channel grow bigger and better, go to patreon.com/actuallol. I'm John Purkis. Thanks for watching.